Book 6, Part 1 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joshua Christensen. The Aeneid, by Publius Virgilius Maro. Translated by John Dryden. Book 6, The World Below. Part 1. He said, and wept, then spread his sails before the winds, and reach'd at length the Cumaean shore. Their anchors dropp'd, his crew the vessels moor. They turn their heads to sea, their sterns to land, and greet with greedy joy th' Italian strand. Some strike from clashing flints their fiery seed, some gather sticks the kindled flames to feed, or search for hollow trees and fell the woods, or trace thro' valleys the discover'd floods. Thus, while their sev'ral charges they fulfil, the pious prince ascends the sacred hill, where Phoebus is ador'd, and seeks the shade which hides from sight his venerable maid. Deep in a cave the Sibyl makes abode, thence full of fate returns, and of the god. Thro' Trivia's grove they walk, and now behold, and enter now the temple roof'd with gold. Where Daedalus, to fly the Cretan shore, his heavy limbs on jointed pinions bore, the first who sail'd in air, 'tis sung by fame. To the Cumaean coast at length he came, and here alighting built this costly frame. Inscrib'd to Phoebus, here he hung on high the steerage of his wings, that cut the sky. Then o'er the lofty gate his art emboss'd Androgeos' death, and off'rings to his ghost. 7 youths from Athens yearly sent, to meet the fate appointed by revengeful Crete. And next to those the dreadful urn was placed, in which the destined names by lots were cast. The mournful parents stand around in tears, and rising Crete against their shore appears. There too, in living sculpture might be seen the mad affection of the Cretan queen. Then how she cheats her bellowing lover's eye, the rushing leap, the doubtful progeny. The lower part a beast, a man above, the monument of their polluted love. Not far from thence he grav'd the wondrous maze, 1,000 doors, 1,000 winding ways. Here dwells the monster, hid from human view, not to be found but by the faithful clue. Till the kind artist, mov'd with pious grief, lent to the loving maid this last relief, and all those erring paths described so well, that Theseus conquer'd, and the monster fell. Here hapless Icarus had found his part, had not the father's grief restrain'd his art. He twice essay'd to cast his son in gold, twice from his hands he dropp'd the forming mould. All this with wond'ring eyes Aeneas view'd, each varying object his delight renew'd. Eager to read the rest, Achates came, and by his side the mad divining dame, the priestess of the god, Deiphobe her name. "Time suffers not," she said, "to feed your eyes with empty pleasures. Haste the sacrifice. 7 bullocks yet unyok'd for Phoebus choose, and for Diana 7 unspotted ewes." This said, the servants urge the sacred rites, while to the temple she the prince invites. A spacious cave, within its farmost part, was hew'd and fashion'd by laborious art. Thro' the hill's hollow sides before the place 100 doors, 100 entries grace. As many voices issue, and the sound of Sibyl's words as many times rebound. Now to the mouth they come, aloud she cries, "This is the time, enquire your destinies. He comes, behold the god!" Thus while she said, and shiv'ring at this sacred entry stay'd, her colour chang'd, her face was not the same, and hollow groans from her deep spirit came. Her hair stood up, convulsive rage possess'd her trembling limbs, and heav'd her lab'ring breast. Greater than humankind she seem'd to look, and with an accent more than mortal spoke. Her staring eyes with sparkling fury roll, when all the gods came rushing on her soul. Swiftly she turn'd, and, foaming as she spoke, "Why this delay?" she cried. "The pow'rs invoke! Thy pray'rs alone can open this abode, else vain are my demands, and dumb the god." She said no more. The trembling Trojans hear, o'erspread with the damp sweat and holy fear. The prince himself, with awful dread possess'd, his vows to great Apollo thus address'd: "Indulgent God, propitious pow'r to Troy, Swift to relieve, unwilling to destroy, directed by whose hand the Dardan dart Pierc'd the proud Grecians' only mortal part, thus far, by fate's decrees and thy commands, thro' ambient seas and thro' devouring sands, our exil'd crew has sought th' Ausonian ground, and now, at length, the flying coast is found. Thus far the fate of Troy, from place to place, with fury has pursued her wand'ring race. Here cease, ye pow'rs, and let your vengeance end. Troy is no more, and can no more offend. And thou, O sacred maid, inspir'd to see th' event of things in dark futurity, give me what Heav'n has promis'd to my fate, to conquer and command the Latian state, to fix my wand'ring gods, and find a place for the long exiles of the Trojan race. Then shall my grateful hands a temple rear to the twin gods, with vows and solemn pray'r, and annual rites, and festivals, and games shall be perform'd to their auspicious names. Nor shalt thou want thy honours in my land, for there thy faithful oracles shall stand Preserv'd in shrines, and every sacred lay, Which by thy mouth Apollo shall convey, All shall be treasur'd by a chosen train Of holy priests, and ever shall remain. But, oh, commit not thy prophetic mind To flitting leaves, the sport of every wind, Lest they disperse in air our empty fate. Write not, but, what the pow'rs ordain, relate." Struggling in vain, impatient of her load, and lab'ring underneath the pond'rous god, the more she strove to shake him from her breast, with more and far superior force he press'd, commands his entrance, and, without control, usurps her organs, and inspires her soul. Now with a furious blast the 100 doors Ope of themselves; a rushing whirlwind roars Within the cave, and Sybil's voice restores: "Escap'd the dangers of the wat'ry reign, Yet more and greater ills by land remain. The coast, so long desir'd, nor doubt th' event, Thy troops shall reach, but having reach'd, repent. Wars, horrid wars, I view, a field of blood, And Tiber rolling with a purple flood. Simois nor Xanthus shall be wanting there; A new Achilles shall in arms appear, And he too goddess born. Fierce Juno's hate, Added to hostile force, shall urge thy fate. To what strange nations shalt thou not resort, Driv'n to solicit aid at every court? The cause the same which Ilium once oppress'd, A foreign mistress, and a foreign guest. But thou, secure of soul, unbent with woes, The more thy fortune frowns, the more oppose. The dawnings of thy safety shall be shown, From whence thou least shalt hope, a Grecian town." Thus from the dark recess the Sibyl spoke, And the resisting air the thunder broke. The cave rebellow'd, and the temple shook. Th' ambiguous god, who rul'd her lab'ring breast, In these mysterious words his mind express'd. Some truth reveal'd, in terms involv'd the rest. At length her fury fell, her foaming ceas'd, And ebbing in her soul the god decreas'd. Then thus the chief: "No terror to my view, No frightful face of danger can be new. Inur'd to suffer, and resolv'd to dare, The fates, without my pow'r, shall be without my care. This let me crave, since near your grove the road To hell lies open, and the dark abode Which Acheron surrounds, the navigable flood. Conduct me thro' the regions void of light, And lead me longing to my father's sight. For him 1,000 dangers I have sought, And rushing where the thickest Grecians fought, Safe on my back the sacred burden brought. He, for my sake, the raging ocean tried, And wrath of heav'n, my still auspicious guide, And bore beyond the strength decrepid age supplied. Oft since he breath'd his last, in dead of night, His reverend image stood before my sight, Enjoin'd to seek, below, his holy shade, Conducted there by your unerring aid. But you, if pious minds by pray'rs are won, Oblige the father, and protect the son. Yours is the pow'r, nor Proserpine in vain Has made you priestess of her nightly reign. If Orpheus, arm'd with his enchanting lyre, The ruthless king with pity could inspire; If from the shades below redeem his wife; If Pollux, off'ring his alternate life, Could free his brother, and can daily go By turns aloft, by turns descend below. Why name I Theseus, or his greater friend, Who trode the downward path, and upward could ascend? Not less than theirs from Jove my lineage came, My mother greater, my descent the same." So pray'd the Trojan prince, and while he pray'd, His hands upon the holy altar laid. Then thus replied the prophetess divine: "O goddess born of great Anchises' line, the gates of hell are open night and day; Smooth the descent, and easy is the way. But to return, and view the cheerful skies, In this the task and mighty labour lies. To few great Jupiter imparts this grace, And those of shining worth and heav'nly race. Betwixt those regions and our upper light, Deep forests and impenetrable night Possess the middle space. Th' infernal bounds Cocytus with his sable waves surrounds. But if so dire a love your soul invades, As twice below to view the trembling shades; If you so hard a toil will undertake, As twice to pass th' innavigable lake, Receive my counsel. In the neighb'ring grove There stands a tree; the queen of Stygian Jove Claims it her own. Thick woods and gloomy night Conceal this happy plant from human sight. One bough it bears, but, wondrous to behold, The ductile rind and leaves of radiant gold. This from the vulgar branches must be torn, And to fair Proserpine the present borne, Ere leave be giv'n to tempt the nether skies. The first thus rent, a second will arise, And the same metal the same room supplies. Look round the wood with lifted eyes to see The lurking gold upon the fatal tree; Then rend it off, as holy rites command. The willing metal will obey thy hand, Following with ease, if favour'd by thy fate. Thou art foredoom'd to view the Stygian state. If not, no labour can the tree constrain, And strength of stubborn arms and steel are vain. Besides, you know not, while you here attend, Th' unworthy fate of your unhappy friend. Breathless he lies, and his unburied ghost, Depriv'd of fun'ral rites, pollutes your host. Pay first his pious dues, and, for the dead, 2 sable sheep around his hearse be led. Then living turfs upon his body lay. This done, securely take the destin'd way, To find the regions destitute of day." She said, and held her peace. Aeneas went, Sad from the cave, and full of discontent, Unknowing what the sacred Sibyl meant. Achates, the companion of his breast, Goes walking by his side, with equal cares oppress'd. Walking they talk'd, and fruitlessly divin'd What friend the priestess by those words design'd. But soon they found an object to deplore. Misenus lay extended on the shore, Son of the god of winds, none so renown'd, The warrior trumpet in the field to sound, With breathing brass to kindle fierce alarms, And rouse to dare their fate in honourable arms. He serv'd great Hector, and was ever near, Not with his trumpet only, but his spear. But by Pelides' arms when Hector fell, He chose Aeneas, and he chose as well. Swoln with applause, and aiming at still more, He now provokes the sea gods from the shore. With envy Triton heard the martial sound, And the bold champion for his challenge drown'd. Then cast his mangled carcass on the strand. The gazing crowd around the body stand. All weep, but most Aeneas mourns his fate, And hastens to perform the funeral state. In altar wise a stately pile they rear, The basis broad below, and top advanced in air. An ancient wood, fit for the work design'd, The shady covert of the salvage kind, The Trojans found. The sounding ax is plied. Firs, pines, and pitch trees, in the tow'ring pride Of forest ashes, feel the fatal stroke, And piercing wedges cleave the stubborn oak. Huge trunks of trees, fell'd from the steepy crown Of the bare mountains, roll with ruin down. Arm'd like the rest, the Trojan prince appears, And by his pious labour urges theirs. Thus while he wrought, revolving in his mind The ways to compass what his wish design'd, He cast his eyes upon the gloomy grove, And then with vows implor'd the Queen of Love: "O may thy pow'r, propitious still to me, Conduct my steps to find the fatal tree In this deep forest, since the Sibyl's breath Foretold, alas! too true, Misenus' death." Scarce had he said, when full before his sight 2 doves, descending from their airy flight, secure upon the grassy plain alight. He knew his mother's birds, and thus he pray'd: "Be you my guides, with your auspicious aid, And lead my footsteps till the branch be found Whose glitt'ring shadow gilds the sacred ground. And thou, great parent, with celestial care, In this distress be present to my pray'r." Thus having said, he stopp'd with watchful sight, Observing still the motions of their flight, What course they took, what happy signs they show. They fed, and, flutt'ring, by degrees withdrew Still farther from the place, but still in view. Hopping and flying, thus they led him on To the slow lake, whose baleful stench to shun They wing'd their flight aloft; then, stooping low, Perch'd on the double tree that bears the golden bough. Thro' the green leafs the glitt'ring shadows glow, As on the sacred oak the wintry mistletoe, Where the proud mother views her precious brood, And happier branches which she never sow'd. Such was the glitt'ring, such the ruddy rind, And dancing leaves that wanton'd in the wind. He seiz'd the shining bough with gripping hold, And rent away, with ease, the ling'ring gold; Then to the Sibyl's palace bore the prize. Meantime the Trojan troops, with weeping eyes, To dead Maecenas pay his obsequies. First from the ground a lofty pile they rear, Of pitch trees, oaks, and pines, and unctuous fir. The fabric's front with cypress twigs they strew, And stick the sides with boughs of baleful yew. The topmost part his glitt'ring arms adorn. Warm waters then, in brazen caldrons borne, Are pour'd to wash his body, joint by joint, And fragrant oils the stiffen'd limbs anoint. With groans and cries Maecenas they deplore; Then on a bier, with purple cover'd o'er, The breathless body thus bewail'd they lay, And fire the pile, their faces turn'd away. Such reverend rites their fathers used to pay. Pure oil and incense on the fire they throw, And fat of victims, which his friends bestow. These gifts the greedy flames to dust devour, Then on the living coals red wine they pour. And last, the relics by themselves dispose, Which in a brazen urn the priests enclose. Old Coronaeus compass'd thrice the crew, And dipp'd an olive branch in holy dew, Which thrice he sprinkled round, and thrice aloud Invok'd the dead, and then dismiss'd the crowd. But good Aeneas order'd on the shore A stately tomb, whose top a trumpet bore, A soldier's falchion, and a seaman's oar. Thus was his friend interr'd, and deathless fame Still to the lofty cape consigns his name. These rites perform'd, the prince without delay Hastes to the nether world his destin'd way. Deep was the cave, and downward as it went, From the wide mouth, a rocky rough descent; And here the access a gloomy grove defends, And there th' unnavigable lake extends, O'er whose unhappy waters, void of light, No bird presumes to steer his airy flight. Such deadly stenches from the depths arise, And steaming sulphur that infects the eyes. From thence the Grecian bards their legends make, And give the name Avernus to the lake. 4 sable bullocks, in the yoke untaught, For sacrifice the pious hero brought. The priestess pours the wine betwixt their horns, Then cuts the curling hair that first oblation burns, Invoking Hecate hither to repair, A powerful name in hell and upper air. The sacred priests with ready knives bereave The beasts of life, and in full bowls receive The streaming blood, a lamb to hell and night, The sable wool without a streak of white. Aeneas offers, and by fate's decree, A barren heifer, Proserpine, to thee. With holocausts he Pluto's altar fills, 7 brawny bulls with his own hand he kills. Then on the broiling entrails oil he pours, Which ointed thus the raging flame devours. Late the nocturnal sacrifice begun, Nor ended till the next returning sun. Then earth began to bellow, trees to dance, And howling dogs in glimmering light advance, Ere Hecate came. "Far hence be souls profane," the Sibyl cried, "and from the grove abstain. Now, Trojan, take the way thy fates afford, Assume thy courage, and unsheathe thy sword." She said, and pass'd along the gloomy space. The prince pursued her steps with equal pace. Ye realms, yet unreveal'd to human sight, Ye gods who rule the regions of the night, Ye gliding ghosts, permit me to relate the mystic wonders of your silent state. Obscure they went, thro' dreary shades that led along the waste dominions of the dead. Thus wander travellers in woods by night, by the moon's doubtful and malignant light, when Jove in dusky clouds involves the skies, and the faint crescent shoots by fits before their eyes. Just in the gate, and in the jaws of hell, revengeful cares and sullen sorrows dwell, and pale diseases, and repining age, want, fear, and famine's unresisted rage. Here toils, and death's half-brother, sleep, forms terrible to view their sentry keep. With anxious pleasures of a guilty mind, deep frauds before, and open force behind, the Furies' iron beds, and strife that shakes her hissing tresses and unfolds her snakes. Full in the midst of this infernal road, an elm displays her dusky arms abroad. The god of sleep there hides his heavy head, and empty dreams on every leaf are spread. Of various forms unnumber'd spectres more, centaurs in double shapes, besiege the door. Before the passage horrid Hydra stands, and Briareus with all his 100 hands. Gorgons, Geryon with his triple frame, and vain Chimera vomits empty flame. The chief unsheath'd his shining steel, prepar'd, though seiz'd with sudden fear, to force the guard. Off'ring his brandish'd weapon at their face, had not the Sibyl stopp'd his eager pace, and told him what those empty phantoms were, forms without bodies, and impassive air. Hence to deep Acheron they take their way, whose troubled eddies, thick with ooze and clay, are whirl'd aloft, and in Cocytus lost. There Charon stands, who rules the dreary coast, a sordid god. Down from his hoary chin a length of beard descends, uncomb'd, unclean. His eyes like hollow furnaces on fire, a girdle, foul with grease, binds his obscene attire. He spreads his canvas, with his pole he steers, the freights of flitting ghosts in his thin bottom bears. He look'd in years, yet in his years were seen a youthful vigour and autumnal green. An airy crowd came rushing where he stood, which fill'd the margin of the fatal flood. Husbands and wives, boys and unmarried maids, and mighty heroes' more majestic shades, and youths entomb'd before their fathers' eyes, with hollow groans, and shrieks, and feeble cries. Thick as the leaves in autumn strow the woods, or fowls by winter force forsake the floods, and wing their hasty flight to happier lands, such, and so thick, the shiv'ring army stands, and press for passage with extended hands. Now these, now those, the surly boatman bore, the rest he drove to distance from the shore. The hero, who beheld with wond'ring eyes the tumult, mix'd with shrieks, laments, and cries, ask'd of his guide what the rude concourse meant, why to the shore the thronging people bent, what forms of law among the ghosts were us'd, why some were ferried o'er, and some refus'd. "Son of Anchises, offspring of the gods," the Sibyl said, "you see the Stygian floods, the sacred stream which heav'n's imperial state attests in oaths, and fears to violate. The ghosts rejected are th' unhappy crew, depriv'd of sepulchers and funeral due. The boatman, Charon, those the buried host, he ferries over to the farther coast, nor dares his transport vessel cross the waves, with such whose bones are not compos'd in graves. 100 years they wander on the shore; at length, their penance done, are wafted o'er. The Trojan chief his forward pace repress'd, resolving anxious thoughts within his breast. He saw his friends, who, whelm'd beneath the waves, their funeral honours claim'd, and ask'd their quiet graves. The lost Leucapsis in the crowd he knew, and brave leader of the Lycian crew, whom on the Tyrrhene seas the tempests met, the sailors master'd, and the ships o'erset. Amidst the spirits Palinurus press'd, yet fresh from life, a new admitted guest, who, while his steering view'd the stars, and bore his course from Afric to the Latian shore, fell headlong down. The Trojan fix'd his view, and scarcely thro' the gloom the sullen shadow knew. Then thus the prince: "What envious pow'r, O friend, brought your lov'd life to this disastrous end? For Phoebus, ever true in all he said, has in your fate alone my faith betray'd. The god foretold you should not die before You reach'd, secure from seas, th' Italian shore. Is this th' unerring pow'r?" The ghost replied, "Nor Phoebus flatter'd, nor his answers lied, Nor envious gods have sent me to the deep; But, while the stars and course of heav'n I keep, My wearied eyes were seiz'd with fatal sleep. I fell, and, with my weight the helm constrain'd, Was drawn along, which yet my grip retain'd. Now by the winds and raging waves I swear, Your safety more than mine was then my care; Lest of the guide bereft, the rudder lost, Your ship should run against the rocky coast. 3 blust'ring nights, borne by the southern blast, I floated, and discover'd land at last. High on a mountain wave my head I bore, Forcing my strength, and gath'ring to the shore. Panting, but past the danger, now I seiz'd The craggy cliffs, and my tir'd members eas'd. While cumber'd with my dropping clothes I lay, The cruel nation, covetous of prey, Stain'd with my blood th' unhospitable coast. And now by winds and waves my lifeless limbs are toss'd, Which O avert, by yon ethereal light, Which I have lost for this eternal night. Or if by dearer ties you may be won, By your dead sire, and by your living son, Redeem from this reproach my wand'ring ghost; Or with your navy seek the Velin coast, And in a peaceful grave my corpse compose. Or if a nearer way your mother shows, Without whose aid you durst not undertake This frightful passage o'er the Stygian lake, Lend to this wretch your hand, and waft him o'er To the sweet banks of yon forbidden shore." Scarce had he said, the prophetess began: "What hopes delude thee, miserable man? Think'st thou thus unintomb'd to cross the floods, To view the Furies and infernal gods, And visit without leave the dark abodes? Attend the term of long revolving years; Fate and the dooming gods are deaf to tears. This comfort of thy dire misfortune take: The wrath of heav'n, inflicted for thy sake, With vengeance shall pursue th' inhuman coast, Till they propitiate thy offended ghost, And raise a tomb, with vows and solemn pray'r, And Palinurus' name the place shall bear." This calm'd his cares, sooth'd with his future fame, And pleas'd to hear his propagated name. Now nearer to the Stygian lake they draw, Who from the shore the surly boatman saw, Observ'd their passage thro' the shady wood, And mark'd their near approaches to the flood. Then thus he call'd aloud, inflam'd with wrath: "Mortal, whate'er, who this forbidden path In arms presum'st to tread, I charge thee, stand, And tell thy name, and business in the land. Know this: the realm of night, the Stygian shore, My boat conveys no living bodies o'er; Nor was I pleas'd great Theseus once to bear, Who forc'd a passage with his pointed spear; Nor strong Atrides, men of mighty fame, And from th' immortal gods their lineage came. In fetters one the barking porter tied, And took him trembling from his sov'reign's side. 2 sought by force to seize his beauteous bride. To whom the Sibyl thus: "Compose thy mind; Nor frauds are here contriv'd, nor force design'd. Still may the dog the wand'ring troops constrain Of airy ghosts, and vex the guilty train, And with her grisly lord his lovely queen remain. The Trojan chief, whose lineage is from Jove, Much fam'd for arms, and more for filial love, Is sent to seek his sire in your Elysian grove. If neither pity, nor heav'n's command, Can gain his passage to the Stygian strand, This fatal present shall prevail at least." Then shew'd the shining bough, conceal'd within her vest. No more was needful, for the gloomy god Stood mute with awe to see the golden rod, Admir'd the destin'd off'ring to his queen, A venerable gift so rarely seen. His fury thus appeas'd, he puts to land; The ghosts forsake their seats at his command. He clears the deck, receives the mighty freight; The leaky vessel groans beneath the weight. Slowly she sails, and scarcely stems the tides; The pressing water pours within her sides. His passengers at length are wafted o'er, Expos'd in muddy weeds upon the miry shore. No sooner landed, in his den they found The triple porter of the Stygian sound, Grim Cerberus,
who soon began to rear his crested snakes and arm'd his bristling hair. The prudent Sibyl had before prepar'd a sop, in honey steep'd, to charm the guard, which, mix'd with powerful drugs, she cast before his greedy grinning jaws, just oped to roar. With 3 enormous mouths he gapes, and straight, with hunger press'd, devours the pleasing bait. Long draughts of sleep his monstrous limbs enslave; he reels, and, falling, fills the spacious cave. The keeper charm'd, the chief without delay pass'd on, and took th' irremeable way. Before the gates, the cries of babes new born, whom fate had from their tender mothers torn, assault his ears; then those, whose form of laws condemn to die when traitors judge their cause. Nor want they lots, nor judges to review the wrongful sentence, and award anew. Minos, the strict inquisitor, appears, and lives and crimes with his assessors hears. Round in his urn the blended balls he rolls, absolves the just, and dooms the guilty souls. The next, in place and punishment, are they who prodigally throw their souls away; fools who, repining at their wretched state, and loathing anxious life, suborn'd their fate. With late repentance now they would retrieve the bodies they forsook, and wish to live; their pains and poverty desire to bear, to view the light of heav'n, and breathe the vital air. But fate forbids; the Stygian floods oppose, and with circling streams the captive souls inclose. End of Book 6, Part 1.
Ascends the sacred hill where Phoebus is ador'd, and seeks the shade which hides from sight his venerable maid. Deep in a cave the Sibyl makes abode, thence full of fate returns, and of the god. Thro' Trivia's grove they walk, and now behold, and enter now the temple roof'd with gold. Where Daedalus, to fly the Cretan shore, his heavy limbs on jointed pinions bore, the first who sail'd in air, 'tis sung by fame. To the Cumaean coast at length he came, and here alighting built this costly frame. Inscribed to Phoebus, here he hung on high the steerage of his wings, that cut the sky. Then o'er the lofty gate his art emboss'd Androgeos' death, and off'rings to his ghost. 7 youths from Athens yearly sent, to meet the fate appointed by revengeful Crete. And next to those the dreadful urn was plac'd, in which the destined names by lots were cast. The mournful parents stand around in tears, and rise not the same, and hollow groans from her deep spirit came. Her hair stood up, convulsive rage possess'd her trembling limbs, and heav'd her lab'ring breast. Greater than humankind she seem'd to look, and with an accent more than mortal spoke. Her staring eyes with sparkling fury roll, when all the gods came rushing on her soul. Swiftly she turn'd, and, foaming as she spoke, "Why this delay?" she cried. "The pow'rs invoke! Thy pray'rs alone can open this abode, Else vain are my demands, and dumb the god." She said no more. The trembling Trojans hear, o'erspread with the damp sweat and holy fear. The prince himself, with awful dread possess'd, his vows to great Apollo thus address'd: "Indulgent god, propitious pow'r to Troy, swift to relieve, unwilling to destroy, directed by whose hand the Dardan dart pierc'd the proud Grecians' only mortal part, thus far, by fate's decrees and thy commands, thro' Book 6, Part 1 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joshua Christensen. The Aeneid, by Publius Virgilius Maro. Translated by John Dryden. Book 6, The World Below. Part 1. He said, and wept, then spread his sails before the winds, and reach'd at length the Cumaean shore. Their anchors dropp'd, his crew the vessels moor. They turn their heads to sea, their sterns to land, and greet with greedy joy th' Italian strand. Some strike from clashing flints their fiery seed, some gather sticks the kindled flames to feed, or search for hollow trees and fell the woods, or trace thro' valleys the discover'd floods. Thus, while their sev'ral charges they fulfil, the pious prince, eager to read the rest, Achates came, and by his side the mad divining dame, the priestess of the god, Deiphobe her name. "Time suffers not," she said, "to feed your eyes With empty pleasures: haste the sacrifice. 7 bullocks yet unyok'd for Phoebus choose, And for Diana 7 unspotted ewes." This said, the servants urge the sacred rites, While to the temple she the prince invites. A spacious cave, within its farmost part, Was hew'd and fashion'd by laborious art. Thro' the hill's hollow sides, before the place, 100 doors, 100 entries grace. As many voices issue, and the sound Of Sybil's words as many times rebound. Now to the mouth they come; aloud she cries, "This is the time; enquire your destinies. He comes! Behold the god!" Thus while she said, and shiv'ring at the sacred entry stay'd, her colour chang'd, her face was nothing. Crete against their shore appears. There too, in living sculpture, might be seen The mad affection of the Cretan queen. Then how she cheats her bellowing lover's eye, The rushing leap, the doubtful progeny. The lower part a beast, a man above, The monument of their polluted love. Not far from thence he grav'd the wondrous maze, 1,000 doors, 1,000 winding ways. Here dwells the monster, hid from human view, Not to be found but by the faithful clue. Till the kind artist, mov'd with pious grief, Lent to the loving maid this last relief, And all those erring paths describ'd so well, That Theseus conquer'd, and the monster fell. Here hapless Icarus had found his part, Had not the father's grief restrain'd his art. He twice essay'd to cast his son in gold, Twice from his hands he dropp'd the forming mould. All this with wond'ring eyes Aeneas view'd; Each varying object his delight renew'd.